We are joined today by the team from Eco Animal Health, who are taking the opportunity to, outside of the normal reporting period, talk you through a little bit more in depth on the business and in particular the R&D pipeline, the real sort of growth value driver behind the group. We've got three of the team here today, two of whom you'll met before, Marc and Chris, but we're also joined by Hafid, who will talk you through the bulk of the presentation. Ample opportunity for Q&A at the end. The presentation is going to take roughly about an hour, so a little bit more in depth than usual. And then I say we'll move on to questions. So without further ado, over to you, Marc.
Thank you, Hannah. If we skip over the disclaimers and take a look at the afternoon's agenda, I am going to give a brief introduction to the company, to Eco, as background to our new product journey. I will introduce Dr. Hafid Benchaoui, who will lead us through Eco's innovative R&D program. Finally, Chris Wilks, CFO, will pull it all together and deal with the financials. Thereafter, we'll be delighted to take questions and answers. We would like to illustrate, moving beyond a new dawn for Eco, is to begin with the investment case. Eco does have an expanding but incomplete product portfolio. We have focused on growth markets in the strategically identified sectors of pigs and poultry, where we target economically important diseases in the respiratory and gastrointestinal or gut segments. We do have a robust and cash generative business. Now, providing a little further color around the background to the business, what makes Eco Eco? We develop and market branded veterinary pharmaceuticals worldwide. Our flagship product is Abelson. It is a new generation antibiotic, taking market share from older competitors. All of our manufacturing is third-party or toll manufacture, but we do manage these contract manufacturing organizations in-house. Our active ingredients and other excipients to our formulations are also purchased from subcontractors. Our historical growth in sales and profit, despite the recent reversals in the Chinese market, will be supported over the next 5 years through the introduction of vaccines and other molecules currently under development. We invest about £10 million in R&D each year, and we have a staff complement of 200 people worldwide. So on the next two slides, we have a map which illustrates our global footprint. We have a well-established sales network in more than 70 countries, with 14 regional offices in strategic markets where food is produced. The next slide illustrates channel access or routes to market. Historically, these have been third-party distribution, but as the business has matured, we have moved into the creation of subsidiaries and joint ventures in those key food-producing markets, refining our approach in the fullness of time to sell direct to major pig and poultry integrators via key account management principles. In order to set the backdrop for our R&D investments, I do want to make a couple of points about Abelson, our flagship product. It is a new generation antibiotic and represents about 80% of revenue for our business and growing rapidly. We have global licenses, licensed in more than 70 countries, and the product treats important, economically important, respiratory and gastrointestinal diseases of pigs and poultry under veterinary supervision. And I emphasize under veterinary supervision. This drug, is a highly effective medication compared to our competitors. The water-soluble formulation is ideal for treatment. It delivers outstanding clinical results, which are of economic benefit to the producer, while using significantly less antibiotic. And as a result of these attributes, our current market share at the end of the financial year 2021 was about 19%. We see this represented on the next slide, where Abelson, with annual revenues ex-eco of $120 million per year, lies mid-table. We position ourselves only against the global key brands from the major multinational animal health companies in this segment. These companies are Zoetis, a spin-out from Pfizer, and Elanco, which was formed by the merger of the animal health interests of Novartis and Elanco. A number of these molecules are somewhat dated, and ECO continues to make steady progress in driving up market share in this segment. To conclude this short introduction, I would like to comment on ECO's corporate strategy. Our corporate strategy is anchored by the development of a broad portfolio of products for pig and poultry producers. Abelson will continue to grow. This growth will be achieved by the geographical expansion and rollout of existing Abelson approvals, complemented by growth from new imminent Abelson approvals in key regions. M&A activity is under consideration, but our focus is on vaccine development with worldwide exclusive rights. At this point, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Hafid Benchaoui. Hafid joined ECO in March 2016. He has acquired and built a team of formidable research and development scientists during his tenure. Prior to joining ECO, Hafid had a 20-year career in the animal health companies Zoetis, ex-Pfizer, Novartis, and Elanco, the ones we mentioned as the global players in the Abelson business. Hafid is a veterinarian by training and has a doctorate in veterinary pharmacology, which he obtained from the University of Glasgow's Veterinary School. Hafid, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today. 4 years ago, we set ourselves the ambitious goal of reimagining the control of infectious diseases in animal health, and more specifically in our area of focus, which is swine and poultry, with the ultimate aim of providing useful solutions that address the unmet needs of the industry, and to create and build long-term value through innovation. And as you will see through the concrete examples we have picked from the pipeline for you today, we have made significant progress and gained meaningful traction in delivering on those goals. The faces you see here are some members of my team who have participated at the capital markets event this morning. You can find their full contribution and slides on the website. And I will summarize them later on in the presentation. We are small in size and lean as an R&D organization, but we have depth, we have breadth, and also we have purpose and commitment within our small organization and across our network of consultants, covering the key functions that are pivotal to the discovery, development, registration, and registration of new veterinary products. We have 4 global project leaders, and they are supported by the specialist functions of clinical development, process development, regulatory affairs, as well as project management support. In line with our lean operational model, we don't have any animal facilities or indeed any R&D laboratory capabilities of our own. And this helps us keep our fixed costs to the absolute minimum and to dedicate the vast majority of our funds to the projects. So our model is based on external partnerships and external innovation to come up with new ideas, to design discovery programs, and to execute those programs and generate data. All our discovery programs are outsourced to our external partners. Our process development, scale up, and manufacturing are also outsourced. Our vaccine development model is to retain the leadership through our global project leaders and to outsource the execution through our network of CROs or contract research organizations. In terms of speed to market, we prioritize the US registration, which opens the door to all other geographies that are keen to see USDA approval to grant local approval. And then, of course, the EU, the UK, and China. China has its own unique requirements for registration and manufacture of vaccines, and we have designed a strategy to specifically deal with that in the future. This slide shows our wide network of active external collaborations. For example, here in the UK alone, we have active partnerships with the Roslin Institute, the Pirbright Institute, the Vaccine Group, Mordun, and 272Bio, to name but a few. The relationship we have with each of these partners is absolutely key to our ability to operate effectively as a lean R&D organization. When we set out to work on a new idea and a new product concept, there are three cardinal questions that we aim to address. Does the product work? Is it safe for the animal, the consumer, the user, and the environment? And can we make it consistently to the required scale and quality standards? The process that you see laid out here is the stepwise approach we take to address those three questions, culminating with the submission of our dossiers to the regulatory authorities for their review and assessment to ultimately obtain marketing authorizations in the various geographies of interest. It's a long and complex process, but sometimes we can shorten that time frame, and whenever we see an opportunity to do that, we do. And I will share with you shortly two examples, the poultry mycoplasma vaccines, where we cut this entire time frame by half. There is uncertainty here, but the process is much less risky than in human health, simply because in animal health, we can go into the target species, in our case, pigs and poultry, very early on. As soon as we have a lead candidate that emerges from the lab screening that we do in discovery, we rapidly scale up and quickly assess the efficacy and safety of that candidate in the animals. They can't do that in human health. They can't go so rapidly into humans. They do the lab testing, then they test in animals, which takes a long time, and then they move into humans. But that transition from animal to humans fails most of the time. Whereas here, going into the clinical setting straight away does two things. It speeds up the process of identifying candidates that are likely to succeed in the target animal, and it allows us to terminate those projects that are unsuccessful very early on before they start consuming too much of our time, money, and resources. Another strategy to manage our risk is to always have several projects running in parallel to counter the inevitable effect of attrition, and we will see that later when we talk about the pipeline. The concept of PTRS, or probability of technical and regulatory success, that you see at the bottom, allows us to quantify uncertainty across time. As we make progress and generate data, we close the knowledge gap on those three questions I mentioned earlier: efficacy, safety, and quality. And we gain greater confidence in the product concept. So it is a long and complex pathway, but we believe we have the know-how, the experience, and also the agility to shorten that time frame for a number of our projects, as you will hear later. Over the past 4 years, our strategy has been to shift the way we spend our R&D funds from the life cycle management of existing brands to funding true innovation and creating value through a pipeline of vaccines and biologics for our two sectors of interest, pigs and poultry. That shift in focus and investment was accompanied by a significant increase in funding to enable us to drive forward our growing innovation portfolio. In creating the new R&D pipeline, we avoided spaces that are low margin, high competition. So for example, we intentionally avoided going after prebiotic and probiotic feed additives. We may have in our pipeline vaccine vectors that have probiotic properties, but that's not our main aim. Our main aim is to target specific diseases and to address unmet needs, the unmet needs of the industry by bringing new technologies to the table and generating first-in-class products. And where we use existing technologies and compete with existing products, we aim to secure sufficient differentiation to be best in class. And also with these new products, we aim to complement the Evlozin brand. There will always be a need for both vaccines and therapeutics on the marketplace. We also aim to be the solution provider when it comes to controlling mycoplasmosis in swine and poultry. And to do that, we need both Evlozin and some of the vaccines that are coming through the pipeline. Cost of goods are front and center of our focus from the outset of any discovery program because of the price-sensitive industry we are in. And this is why we are investing in platform technologies that can be applied and leveraged across products to ultimately give us speed, efficiency, and scale. Over the past 4 years, we have created IP assets that we aim to protect, and that process has already started, as you will hear later on. The key here is to strike a good balance between filing early to delineate our sandbox, but not too early as to consume a large proportion of the lifespan of the patent before the product is even approved and launched. We, of course, want to maximize the duration of exclusivity post-approval. We'll now focus on the pipeline. Our R&D portfolio is centered on novel solutions for the treatment and prevention of viral, bacterial, and parasitic diseases of poultry and swine. So far, we've grown the pipeline organically through our own ideas or through partnerships on early stage research projects, which are now paying off, like the poultry mycoplasma vaccines you'll hear about shortly, and which will gain US approval at the end of next year, or indeed the PRRS virus collaborations we have with the Pirbright Institute and the vaccine group that you'll also hear about this afternoon. The projects we have are at different stages of their evolution. So we have a mix of early, mid, and late stage development programs. We have achieved approval of our first vaccines in Brazil last year, and those are now generating revenue in Brazil. To de-risk our pipeline, we have chosen to incorporate in it a mix of well-established, tried and trusted concepts, as well as some unique, novel and disruptive technologies and platforms, mostly in the vaccines and biologics space. Also, as a de-risking strategy, we need to keep the number of projects up to really counter that inevitable effect of attrition that I alluded to earlier. In parallel with the progression of the innovation pipeline, we've also gained significant traction with the life cycle management of avlosin by securing recently the swine mycoplasma claim in Europe, the US, and Canada for the water-soluble formulation. This slide shows our pipeline for poultry. The bubbles in teal are the 5-year peak sales, and the green bubbles are the development costs. P is for proprietary and L is for licensed in. Aside from the zero withholding time for eggs that we are seeking a claim for in China for avlosin water-soluble granules, which is expected to be granted in the next quarter of this year, the entire poultry pipeline is one of vaccines and biologics. And out of those eight projects, the most advanced are the 2 mycoplasma vaccines that you will hear about shortly and that are expected to receive US approval by the end of 2023. Our swine pipeline is outlined on this slide. There are 3 pharmaceutical projects here, 2 of which are avlosin life cycle management projects. The one on the upper side of the timeline arrow on the left is a submission to the FDA we made last year of reproductive safety data to lift the restriction on the use of avlosin in breeding sows. The other life cycle management project is to gain approval for the use of avlosin water-soluble granules in the treatment of swine respiratory disease in China. And the third pharmaceutical project is a novel controlled release injectable formulation of an antimicrobial for the treatment of swine respiratory disease. And I'll talk a little bit more about that one later. Clearly, the biggest value of the swine pipeline is in the vaccines and biologics that you see on the right-hand side, tackling PRRS virus and other respiratory pathogens of importance in the swine industry. And I'll give a little bit more detail on the progress we've made on that front. This is a summary of both poultry and swine pipelines presented in a different way to really highlight the different stages and the waves of projects that are coming through at different stages of the development cycle. We've also included here the approvals that we achieved recently with 3 vaccines licensed in Brazil and the swine mycoplasma claim for avlosin water-soluble across Europe and North America. As we progress over time, revenue growth will be driven by new products entering the company portfolio, and the contribution of those innovations will undoubtedly increase as the pipeline matures over the next 7 years. We'll now delve into a little bit more detail on a couple of examples we have taken from the pipeline, the poultry mycoplasma vaccines, to really showcase the progress that has been achieved and the journey we have had with these 2 accelerated R&D programs, and how we took 2 vaccine concepts from academia right through to late-stage development, and how we are now on track to delivering 2 new poultry products in 5 years. Natalie is a member of my team, and she's in charge of these 2 projects. Mycoplasmosis in poultry is a high-impact respiratory infection that causes major losses because of mortality and reduced body weight gain in broilers and a drop in egg production in laying hens. MG alone costs nearly $800 million to the producers per year. And this is why 3 years ago, we partnered with the University of Georgia to develop 2 best-in-class vaccines against the 2 major pathogens that cause mycoplasmosis in chickens, MS and MG, with the intentional view of addressing shortfalls in the existing vaccines, the suboptimal efficacy against MS, suboptimal safety of the MG vaccines, and the supply issues related to the fact that the available vaccines need to be kept frozen. And the way we did this was by working closely with the University of Georgia in the US and allowing them to drive the research programs in the early phases of the projects, whilst we gave them support and kept track of progress in terms of lead identification and demonstrating proof of concept for efficacy and safety. And that took about a year and a half. Once that was done, we felt it was time to start the early clinical development work. We took the lead and started running the regulatory studies at CROs, the contract research organizations that we've selected. And we also started the important work of developing the process of production at a CDMO or manufacturing site that we've selected called Diamond Animal Health, based in the US. And we started laying the master seeds to allow the future scale up and manufacture of the vaccines ahead of the tech transfer to manufacturing that will happen this year. And we are on track to start the submission to the regulatory authorities in the US in the second half of next year and obtain the US approval at the end of 2023. And to the extent that is possible, we'll use the data we generated in the US for geo expansion in other countries. And where we need to generate local data for registration, we will do that. And that will be the case, for example, for China. Moving on to the porcine biologics portfolio, Veronica Fowler is the global project leader looking after these projects. We have some breakthrough innovations that we are working on to deliver unique solutions to PRRS virus as well as other respiratory pathogens of importance in swine. PRRS virus is a highly infectious viral disease of pigs characterized by abortions in the breeding sow and respiratory disease in the piglets. Vaccines do exist, however, they have serious safety and efficacy issues, and they are often used as a last resort, leaving the industry desperate for an effective solution. And this is why we initiated 3 research programs looking at unique approaches to tackle this virus by bringing to the market best-in-class vaccines and a first-in-class biotherapeutic for which we have secured IP protection. On this slide, you can see the performance of one of our PRRS virus vaccine candidates, which can generate a very high antiviral response depicted in the green curve on the first figure. This antiviral response translates into a dramatic reduction in clinical scores, as illustrated in green on the second figure in the middle. In the last figure on the right-hand side, it can be seen that our vaccine generates an antiviral response, which is also cross-protective between highly divergent strains of PRRS, a characteristic which has never been achieved with any vaccine currently on the market. This is another one of our vaccines for controlling respiratory disease. These proof of concept results show that we can achieve equivalent protection to a commercial comparator at 2 to 3 times a lower dose, as illustrated by reductions in the clinical score and virus in the blood. We are currently optimizing the dose, and then this project can move into development. So it is an exciting time for the swine portfolio with our positive proof of concept studies, allowing us to rapidly refine our products and move fast towards development. We've always wanted an injectable antimicrobial to complement the Avlozin brand. Alfonso Lopez is a board-certified swine veterinarian in our team, and he is progressing a novel long-acting injectable formulation of an antimicrobial to treat swine respiratory disease with a single injection. Swine respiratory disease is a mixed bacterial infection of the respiratory tract, causing pneumonia with devastating animal welfare and production consequences in the swine industry. Our aim through this licensed technology is to develop a product that has long duration of efficacy with one injection, less labor, less animal handling, and better animal welfare, broader protection than other market leaders, and a different class and spectrum of activity to Avlozin. This shows what the technology delivered in our proof of concept program. On the left, you see the blood levels of the antibiotic when we give our product as a single shot in green, and when the commercial comparator is given twice, 48 hours apart in teal color. The important criteria here is for the blood levels to be above the MIC90 line that you see in brown. And as you can see, with one single shot, we achieve what the comparator can only achieve with 2 injections. On the right-hand side is another study where we compared the efficacy of our product to that of a market leader against a severe challenge with a respiratory pathogen called Actinobacillus pleuropneumoniae. And as you can see, survival after treatment with the market leader is only 50%, whereas with our product, all pigs survived at the high dose of 40 as well as 30 milligrams per kilo. And all those that received the sham injection or placebo died within 2 days. So we have here a very effective broad spectrum, long-acting formulation that can treat swine respiratory disease with a single injection. To finish off, I'll briefly mention our strategy for vaccine manufacturing. And this effort is led and coordinated by our senior consultant, Mike Loomes, who is based in the US. And I will now share with you how we are addressing that important piece of the development cycle and how we have planned a short-term strategy as well as a longer-term strategy for our vaccine manufacturing. For the production of the 2 poultry mycoplasma vaccines that are lined up for approval at the end of next year, we have a manufacturing partnership with Diamond Animal Health in the US. Longer term, we plan to have a CDMO or contract development and manufacturing organization selected in Europe that will supply vaccines globally. But to reduce costs, we will do fill and finish locally, for example, in the US and LATAM. For China, which has its own unique requirements, we have a 3-phase strategy whereby we start with a research and development site, then upgrade to do pilot scale production, and then we invest in a full CGMP manufacturing capability. That completes the R&D presentation, and we look forward to your questions and comments after Chris's financial wrap-up and concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Hafid. Wow, it's quite a big ask to follow a presentation like that, which is full of content and full of excitement. I think the point in the next few slides is just to try and unpick some of that technological excitement and to represent it as what it might represent in financial terms. So this is the slide you saw earlier from Hafid, and I represent this slide because it's it's quite an important image. What we've got here is the program, the full portfolio of R&D projects, and the important takeaway from this is the spread of the projects, both obviously between the different species, which you heard about, but also stage of development, right through from early stage, the preclinical stage. So we're still in the laboratory, still running tests to select the most likely candidates to take through to the first in animal trials, right through to other programs. The top 5 are those programs which have already received regulatory approval and they are now commercial. So that's really a demonstration of the fact that ECO has the experience of taking products in the vaccine space right through, and those vaccines in Brazil are an example of that. The other important element of understanding with this slide is the revenue opportunity. So the lower of the 2 graphs, center at the bottom, is the layering up of the revenue project by project on top of the existing business. This does not attempt to in any way risk the revenues, but it does phase the revenues. So as the projects come on stream and turn into products and they become commercial, you can see the effect it has on the total revenue for the group, which in the right hand of the 2 graphs is demonstrated by the makeup of that revenue, reducing from 100%, which is the current product lineup, to less than 50% made up of existing products, and more than 50% being the new products that are being introduced. Now, the final point I'll also make of the slide is that earlier slide that Hafid presented showing the bubbles. The bubbles showed peak revenue by product, and those peak revenues typically arrive 3 to 5 years after product launch. Most of the new products that we assume 5 years to peak or mature revenue. Now, some of the earlier projects, those that are down in the preclinical stage, they're only launching to market in 2028. So clearly, we haven't got anywhere near peak revenue yet. So expanding that graph to the right, say over 10 years, 15 years, you can see that there's significant further revenue opportunity off the side of the page. Hannah, thank you. So looking at this development portfolio, and in terms of value, I ran some numbers over the business cases, and from the revenue and gross profits derived from the expected margins, and overlaying the development cost, you can get to a net present value of the cash flow by project, which I set out there on the right-hand side. And you can see that overall, this portfolio has an opportunity set well in excess of £500 million. And looked at another way, the investment returns, the IRR over 10 years, is calculated at 76%. And I remind you that really we're only looking at a 10-year period here. Much of the value that derives from these projects, particularly the earlier stage projects, falls after the 10-year period when we get to peak revenues and profitability. The other interesting point is that payback is very quick. In each case, each of the business plans shows that the profitability derived from the product pays back the development cost in less than 2 years. So to answer the question, is it an extremely exciting future? I'd probably suggest that it is. From these figures alone, you can see there's significant value here. The other point that this development program delivers, and this is a further important point, it's not only the revenue opportunity, which we talked through, but the reduction in risk. today, it is fair to observe that we have a high dependency on avicin, it's clearly a blockbuster product, but nevertheless, it represents 80% of the group's sales today, and therefore there's that high dependency. Introducing, a more than doubling in revenue from vaccines clearly helps with that dependency. Also, as these vaccines are being introduced in the US, North America, Latin America, and Europe first, we will reduce, at least in the short term, our dependency on China, which observers of the eco story will know that that's become quite a prominent feature of our story in the last couple of years. And finally, we're increasing our exposure to the preventative space. Preventative therapies represent a much larger market and significantly higher margins than we currently derive from the avicin business. So overall, higher profitability, faster growth, reduced risk, helps the overall corporate strategy, helps the overall corporate look of eco. But I think we should remind ourselves that whilst that's a great story, sometimes life ain't like that. We have to remember that what we've just looked at is based on assumption that all projects make it all the way through the development cycle, and we have seen a bit of attrition, that being the projects failing to make it through one or more gateways. We don't suffer a high rate of attrition, but it's there, and we should assume that as we go forward over the next 5 years or so, there will be projects which fail to make it through. We also need to guide that the cost of this development, whilst nowhere near the sort of scale of human health new product development, it is still a significant cost, and we need to expect that we'll be spending somewhere in the line of 10% of our group revenue in the R&D program for the next 4 years. And we also need to remember that what we're going after here is a very attractive space in the core area of our major competitors. This is a nice place to be, and clearly our major competitors and major players will guard that carefully. So the cost of entry is likely to be lower margins initially as we gain traction. I think we'll be setting off the premium efficacy which the products are likely to show against that sort of cost of entry. But I think we should expect that there'll be some time until we can really gain traction. So what I did was to overlay a risk profile project by project into that portfolio, and therefore look at what the revenue curve looks like on that basis. And the graph shows an indicative, it's suggestive only, but it's indicative of where the revenue for the group might move to with those new products coming on stream over the next 7 years. Once again, remembering that the majority of the value is beyond the 7 years we've got on the slide here. And putting that same risk weighting over the net present values, we get to an R&D pipeline with an NPV, which is an NPV over 10 years of well in excess of £200 million for the portfolio. So to conclude, and here I start with where Marc started, or I finish with where Marc started, which is to say, remind you that we're building off a basis of a very successful product which has been developed over 15 years, that's avicin. We've got a very highly regarded team of scientists. You met Hafid today. He's supported by a tremendous team where there's true depth of world-class science. We've not been scared to tackle new ideas and to invest in and experiment in groundbreaking technologies. Some of those are proving to be really quite exciting and to have remarkable results. We've got 4 years experience in this. And that's over and above the many years of experience in bringing Avicen to market, but we've got 4 years experience in vaccines and biologicals. And we have now got the evidence of bringing the first one to market. Our R&D model, as you've seen, is one which controls cost and is quite a lean model. We also have a program which, on a prudent basis, over 7 years, is likely to double our revenues. And my final thought is that I would suggest to you that the significant value that we see here in this program is probably not baked into the market capitalization of ECO. And so really this today was about lifting the lid for the first time on our new product development activities and showcasing really some hidden value within ECO. I think that brings us to the end of the fixed element of this presentation.
Well, thank you very much for that canter through, gentlemen. We do have some questions, so let's make a start. What sort of royalties and milestone payments are typically due to R&D partners on the new products?
Mark, do you want to take that one, or Hafid?
We're all hesitating because we're all going to try and give an answer. If I give the bones, Hafid could give some flesh. But we sign contracts that allow for a worldwide exclusive position in return for very modest royalties on net sales. And in some of the contracts, we do have a series of milestone payments as the development project moves through the stage gates that Hafid identified. Hafid, would you like to put some numbers on those words, please?
Well, we typically, our partners, they know that we operate in a price-sensitive industry, particularly when it comes to poultry. And we usually manage their expectations from the outset. And that's low single-digit percentage royalty of net sales. The milestones, typically, they never exceed $1 million in total. So that's the sort of amount we're talking about. The milestones are driven by key achievements, typically moving into development, submitting to the regulatory authorities, and of course, gaining regulatory approval in key countries.
Thank you, Hafid. Right, what is the company's expected new capital requirement over the next 24 months?
If I pick that one up, ECO historically has been quite a capital lean, capital unintensive business. Our business model is very much an outsourced business model. Right, you've heard of the outsourced approach to R&D. That is mirrored in the operational side of the business, where we contract others to manufacture product for us. As a result, we don't run factories aside from one in China. That's operated as a joint venture. So, you know, it's a model which has worked very well for us over the years to keep our capital intensity low. It has also meant during COVID it's actually been a very flexible business model. And that's intended to remain the case for the next 2 years. The most capital we're talking about, if we talk about it as investment capital, is in R&D. And you saw earlier on, we suggested that we'd be running R&D at the rate of about 10% of revenue for each of the next 4 years.
Okay, thank you. A couple of coming in here on Avicen. When does the patent expire, and that which would enable generics to compete?
Avicen does have some remaining IP, principally in the areas of disease indications for swine. The molecule has been off patent for a considerable period of time, more than a decade. And ECO has, through a number of initiatives and endeavors, been very successful at combating any generic activity. We are known as the Avicen Company, and all our information suggests that, excluding China, ECO has 90% of the global Avicen market. China, the dynamics are slightly different, and I'll come back to that. But very occasionally, Avicen pops up in less regulated markets, principally in Central America, the Southeast Asian countries that border China, and periodically North Africa and the Middle East. Within China, the generics exist, but they have been there for a considerable period of time. And our position there is this is a high value product underpinned by a great deal of scientific support. And stripping out the market reversals in China over the past 2 years, we have continued to grow in China and the rest of the world at low double-digit figures. So ECO is comfortable with Avicen operating in a world of generics, and we constantly refresh or evergreen the product by launching new disease indications. Most recently, mycoplasmosis in pigs, with a number of countries to benefit from that marketing authorization rollout, and of course, the zero withdrawal period for egg claim, which we are licensing in China and Brazil, amongst other countries.
Okay, so where one of our attendees asks, are any of your large competitors working on their own Avicen type product? It sounds like to me that that's actually not a concern for you, even if they are.
That is correct, Hannah. I think a major competitor, an Elanco or a Zoetis, would not be investing in a generic Avicen. They have their own product portfolio. If you cast your mind back to the market share slide with the bubbles, ECO center stage, the whole arena of investment in antimicrobials, in a sense, that ship has sailed, which is why ECO 4 years ago began to invest very heavily with the hiring of Hafid and his team, and investing 10% of annual revenue into vaccines. We are certainly at the right place at the right time and don't anticipate major generic activity from our competitors.
Okay, helpful, thank you. Right, risk. What is the risk that development costs will exceed 10% of sales, either because of sales volatility or higher costs as you launch vaccines, which would certainly be typical in human drug development?
Good question. I think one should think about this as a tap, and the leadership team at ECO and the board has our hands on the tap. Our view about 10% is that it strikes the right balance between providing sufficient budget to Hafid and his teams to move these programs along at the required pace, whilst at the same time being able to fund it from cash flows, so self-financing. I think we always need to have a close eye on what the revenues are doing and broader cash flows to ensure that self-financing piece remains true. But having set a budget for the year, we tend to allow R&D to run according to budget. It was only last year when we were nosediving into COVID-19 and nobody could predict exactly how that might impact any business, that we pulled back on the lever just to try and be cautious with regards to the year. But I think that's a general guidance. In any given year, it may be a bit above 10% or a bit below 10%, depending on how the revenues go. Okay,
thank you. You have an impressive list of new products. What is the likely failure rate of products? Hey, this is time to get out your crystal ball, but or and obviously not getting regulatory approvals or meeting expectations. But what was the kind of risk discount that you generally applied to these projects? I think you covered this at the end, didn't you, Chris?
Yeah, exactly. And a very, very broad assumption I used was to look at the current PTRS percentage, and Hafid introduced that concept early on in his presentation, and apply those percentages to the net present values and the revenues which were generated. So a very simple approach to probabilistic forecasting, based forecasting, and so that's where it came out, which overall brought the net present value down from 500 million to the 220, which I showed there. A caveat around that assessment, though, is to remember that we truncated it at 10 years, and most of the very exciting projects with bigger revenue opportunities, the major revenue opportunity falls off to the right hand side of that assessment. So what we haven't done, or what I haven't done, is looked at the whole life cycle of these new products and calculated the NPV on that basis. That would be a very different picture, and a significantly larger picture.
Our rate of attrition currently has been remarkably low. If I cast my mind back over the past 5 years, we have dropped a small number of Avellison life cycle management projects and one of our new biologicals projects. So through the system that we've established and the expertise that we have on board, we do expect a modest attrition rate, but it's not going to be in the order of 9 out of 10 projects not making it to market. We have a belief in a far higher success rate than that.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? A bit off topic, but you said that in 10 years, poultry worldwide will be the biggest source of meat. Which is the current largest source of meat? Does anyone know the answer?
No, it remains poultry.
It's
taken a view of what the market dynamics would look like in a decade's time. The world, as probably all attendees know, has an insatiable desire for poultry meat. The growth sectors are principally poultry, pork, and aquaculture at expense of red-blooded meat.
Well, you must have seen the next question then, because somebody asks, are you looking to grow in the aquaculture space?
Restricting ourselves to a 5-year time frame, we clearly will be focusing on pork and poultry. But the ambition for this company is enormous. And so as we step out from this inflection point, in order to become a fully fledged animal health company, we would need to consider other species. And aquaculture is of some interest to ECO. The competition in beef, in particular in cattle, is remarkably entrenched. We would really be the new kid on the block whenever we deviate from our core capabilities. So if we could revisit that at the next strategic cycle review for this business, you may get a slightly different answer to the one I've given you.
Understood. We won't hold you to that. Next question. Genus PLC says it has a realistic prospect of being granted approval for gene editing against PRRSV and a roadmap towards submission for FDA approval if successful. How serious a competitive threat might this be to what you are developing?
ECO has 4 strands of activity within our PERS development project portfolio. Clearly, PERS is of interest given the economic figures flashed up earlier in the presentation. We can categorically say that we are not embarking upon a process involving gene-edited animals. We believe that there are alternative ways to approach this issue.
Your trading update referred to the possibility of increasing your banking facilities to provide flexibility. At the moment, obviously, you have net cash. Development costs are self-funded. So I think perhaps any further comments you want to provide on funding facilities.
I think nothing beyond what we put in the trading statements. I think we said that we were in discussions with providers regarding banking facilities, and that remains the case.
Okay. Some strategic thoughts here on a hookup with Ampario. Is there any overlap between what you both offer, and do you have a good relationship with them?
We have an excellent relationship with Ampario, given that we come from the same rootstock originally as part of the legacy Lawrence group of companies. There are currently no plans to hook up with Ampario. We have approached the market in a different way, seeing the short-term opportunities lying in biologicals or vaccines rather than alternative approaches that Ampario have adopted with some success.
Understood. What progress has been made by your new distributor in the Philippines?
Good progress, recognizing that the Philippines has been somewhat decimated by African swine fever. The Philippines is an interesting market, but I need to characterize it by being very much a second or third tier market rather than amongst the 14 biggest ones. The Philippines distributor was interesting in that they had distribution rights across a number of countries in Southeast Asia, which is a model that ECO has moved away from. We are focusing on local experts with local knowledge in pork and poultry. So I am confident that as the market recovers, we will see continued growth from the Philippines, as we have seen in Thailand this year. Another market of interest is Indonesia. It has enormous opportunity for poultry and lies within the same mini cluster of third-party distribution, a market we will be looking at closely.
And sort of, can you expand on that into Brazil as well? Are these your first vaccine sales into Brazil?
These are our very first vaccine sales. There are a number, all directed at swine diseases. The commercialization of these vaccines allowed ECO very swiftly and in advance of the rest of our development portfolio to gain commercial knowledge of launching into a difficult market, a highly competitive market. So almost a test market, a discrete test market for ECO. The important differentiation here is, of course, the IP does not belong to ECO. This was a co-development with our long-standing joint venture partner, in Canada and the USA. So very helpful for quick and cost-effective learnings, but our strategic intent is to do that single-handedly without a partner, a commercial partner such as the legacy one from Canada and the USA.
Okay, and obviously we've got a number of smaller shareholders on here, and one of them does ask, you know, obviously apart from Mr. Market and COVID, why do you think your shares have taken such a dive over the last few months?
Shall I have a go at this one?
And then I'll give my view, and let's hope we agree. It'll be helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, who are we to analyze exactly what the market has made of it? But it is very clear that if you simply look at the revenue split, you know, in March 21, over 50% of our revenue came from China, and well over 50% of our profitability came from China, remembering that in China we don't do any R&D, and it's a high margin market. So when we provided trading updates against the backdrop of a commodity price in China, which was declining rapidly, clearly we needed to guide the market that our revenue for the coming year end, so the year end of March 22, would be lower than the year end of March 21. And I think that's no surprise. We're not alone in that. You will have seen updates from companies like Genus. And so, you know, that's probably the singular driver of, you know, reduced revenue, reduced profitability that follows from it to move the share price down. So I think as China stabilizes and the pork price in China has started to recover from the low point in October last year, and as the price or value of piglets increases, you know, we will see strength coming back into that market, and our fortunes will follow. But it's very important, and you know, bringing it back to the subject of today, to remember that the output of the R&D program will be to introduce more products which are less China dependent, and it should reduce this volatility associated with China trading.
Okay, we're slightly making our way around the continents here. Can you comment on the current state of the poultry market in India?
It's been absolutely dire for 2 years or more. What we can assure you is that all debt has been fully recovered and business has resumed probably from October onwards. So there are emerging signs of a recovery in that market, but we can't pretend otherwise. It has been enormously difficult on a number of levels. Our third-party distribution partner has been a stalwart. He has repaid everything that he was due to repay, including some of the legacy product acquisition and debt from the previous distributor, and purchasing patterns are beginning to take off, not quite normalized, but certainly on the upward trend. So we are confident that once the worst of the COVID pandemic is behind us, that India will become a powerhouse again for poultry and for eco.
Okay. Perhaps then coming back to some of the earlier points you're just making there, Chris, what's the typical break-even price for pork for eco's main customers in China?
That's it varies over time. For many years, the producers were making very nice profits from a pork price of 13, 14 RMB per kilogram. It is clear over the last year or so that at that same price per kilogram of pork, producers were making a big loss per animal produced. And the reason for that is because you need to look at the total input costs into the cost of rearing a pig, and feed cost is the most significant of those input costs. So feed costs have actually gone up quite considerably. We reckon at the current levels of feed costs and input costs and producing costs that at 17 to 18 RMB per kilogram, producers are making profits. At 20, they'll be making healthy profits. So, the price is kind of there or thereabouts, and producers are now certainly rearing pigs at a much greater level than they were at one point last autumn.
Within the model that Chris has just described, we do need to differentiate between two types of pork producers: those that breed their own piglets and those that buy in piglets. Those who breed piglets are more profitable at a lower price point than those who have to buy expensive piglets. But as a predictor for the overall market recovery, it's well worth watching the price of piglets. Despite which sounds odd, but it's true, you should watch the price of piglets. Despite the fluctuations in the price of pork, which have ranged from about 15 to over 18 through the last quarter, the piglet price just gently ticks up. And of course, piglets are an investment for what you're going to send to market several months into the future.
You heard it here first, people. Right, the Soros Fund has just emerged as your second biggest shareholder. Do you welcome this as a vote of confidence or a possible threat to the company's longer-term independence?
We welcome
investors.
They have been long-standing and very loyal, and it was pleasing for them to take a sizable position at what was a rather attractive price point.
They see the opportunity ahead.
Indeed.
Excellent. Well, as we sit here now, that is it for the questions. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and your patience working through all of those. Marc, particular thanks to you, because I suspect you won't be back. And next it will be the new CEO, David Hallis. You are departing come the 1st of April.
Yes, a potentially auspicious day, but we'll put that aside. I stepped down from the board at the beginning of April, and David Hallis assumes the role of CEO. But I am committed to supporting him and the board and the business on a hopefully declining time commitment over the following quarter. Our executive leadership team is remarkably strong, and you've seen evidence of that today with Hafid. And so I feel that the business is in very good shape to step forward, benefiting from strategic direction and investment that did begin 4 to 5 years ago.
A positive note on which to end. Thank you all for your time today. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.